Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. So today is Friday the 7th of January. I am having quite a bit of, for lack of a better term, hay fever. Like a lot of pollen, a lot of allergies today. So I think this stream will be fairly short. I've also spent most of yesterday doing the Stranger Things Lego set, so as far as accountability section, I didn't really play Fallout 3, so I don't have anything really to say there. So I think we'll just, for the most part today, try and burn through the news fairly quickly. On top of that, there is also the issue where I basically am not going to do the solo quest unless I just do it on screen, and I don't know a way to really focus and have it done on screen and cover the news. So yeah, maybe I could rush through this stream today, and that's definitely what I'm looking to do, and maybe play some solo quests after that. Yeah. All since I woke up today and yesterday, I've just been sneezing like crazy and have a ton of congestion. And for a person who pretty much has a ton of congestion anyways, that's not great. Does not feel great. Ranked matches, and ranked matches. I guess there's no reason to re-roll any of that. As far as this, we have some more rewards. This, I guess you don't get yet. Story mode, I guess they're still awaiting results. Yeah, what do you have to do to really unlock story mode, though? Well, looking at this, it seems like everything's been done. This whole setup, though, is a mess. It really is a mess. Just far too much at the beginning of the new year to ask people to do. You kind of want to get these animated cards because they're like limited time things. So if you were to miss out specifically for the card pack tickets, that would suck, but that wouldn't be too bad of a deal. Same is true for gold and Sears thing, but this Shaman fighter for at 1,000 points is limited. This animated card at 8,000. This is 10,000. It would be fairly limited. So I guess if I just got to 10,000 and then didn't make it any further, that would be fine. What was it that we actually had to play as? Runecraft or Dragoncraft ranked victories. Still getting the treasure chests also. I moved around my macro a little bit, so now gamedeveloper.com articles will be in between the Steam follow list and the games that just came out on Steam, the what's on Steam list of games. So there's a bit of a barrier there always. My Steam follow list program, though, may have a bug in it because I had to manually adjust the comma separated value file that it pulls its information from. So I may have done the math wrong, and I have it programmed to go back to 10 positions previous from where it it started or where it ended, and say that's the new starting line to look for the next games to open and look at next time. It opens 10 tabs, so theoretically, if you closed and removed those 10 tabs from the follow list, then going 10 back would be right in the right spot. But if I somehow ran the macro twice or just removed more than 10 tabs on the follow list, then it misses it, and then it just tries to go all the way to the end of the file, and the Steam follow list is huge, so that would take a long time. Well, that was an easy victory. Good. Thank goodness.
The journey continues.
There is, in Fallout 3, one quest that I found a couple of quests, started them and finished them basically in the same sitting. But there is one quest with like naughty nightwear or sexy sleepwear or something that was a special item you were supposed to deliver, and I don't know if there's anything more to the quest or if it just kind of ends there. I probably should just look it up. I'm at the point now where I could level up and get everything on the map marked as a location to check out, and probably should just do that. It's not like the other skills and perks in Fallout 3 are great. I'm just kind of maxing everything out. I'm either at level 19 or level 20 of 22, so I've really exhausted all of the main game, and it would just be DLC, or it would be let's get all the bobbleheads. And I think I might actually take up the idea of just getting all the bobbleheads and just having a map in front of me to say, here's where the bobblehead is, here's where this bobblehead is, here's where this bobblehead is. I might even need to like print it off just to get through it quickly. Some of these articles, we are back, definitely 2 articles happening. Might be a little repetitive, I guess. And yeah, E3 in-person presentation has been canceled. We'll talk about that later. CES just finished. As far as consumer electronics, TVs, like monitors in sunglasses and other gadgets, all were talked about and shown, certainly, but there's really not a lot that is going to interest me nowadays from CES. Ever since CES broke away from E3 and they were no longer combined, at best what you'd see at CES is just announcements of new video cards and computers, and that's it. Everything else has become very gadgety, and they were always very gadgety, but the gadgets have gotten kind of ridiculous. Maybe I'm just not as young as I used to be, and I'm not enthralled by gadgets as I once would have been, but yeah. Now, like Kohler, the faucet company, showed off like a $6,000 faucet that hangs from the ceiling, which is very odd looking and silly. Interesting. It's taking forever to disconnect here. Or to end the turn. So Video Games Chronicle says Nobody Saves the World hits Xbox and PC this month, including Game Pass. We had heard things about that already. Days Gone director claims Sony made it feel like a disappointment despite outselling Ghost of Tsushima. The director claims the PS4 game sold around $10 million. I assume not 10 million units. Definitely that was the feeling I was getting too, is that the there felt like there was a lot of disappointment around Days Gone. Frankly, I don't think without having actually played the game, I am not sure if I disagree with the idea that Days Gone was kind of a failure. So I would argue that mainstream video game journalism also played a pretty big role in perpetrating the feeling that it was a failure. Yeah. This is probably a great example of where the standards, particularly when you're dealing with a publisher that wants to screw you over and use things like Metacritic to not pay you or not make a sequel, the standards are just far too high. It's like, really, for a small indie game, if you sell 300,000 copies, you probably should be considered a major success. For a AAA game, if you sell 2 million copies, you could be considered a very big success. This might be the one argument where Sony of Japan, who's no longer in charge, was screwing over more Western developers by being dissatisfied and unhappy with Western AAA games, as much as now Sony of California is screwing over Eastern developers for the same thing. I mean, it's ridiculous that it is just kind of breaking down to tribalism, but and xenophobia, but I can't help but feel like that is somewhat the case. That there is there is just a home team advantage based on which Sony happens to be in charge of Sony Interactive Entertainment.
The path ends here.
Of course, the director also would always defend their game and their work. You could certainly see why mainstream video game journalism would not like this, is that you have just like a white guy with a beard, very more closer to being right-wing than left-wing woke character as your main character.
The world calls,
You have
and I
a bunch of zombies. I believe there was a controversy at one point where there was basically naked kid zombies that would chase you in the large hordes. I would also argue, on the other hand, that the idea of Days Gone really was just around the idea of having these giant zombie hordes attack you, and I don't think there's a full game to that. It would be interesting to compare what Dying Light 2 feels like and plays like compared to Days Gone. But yeah, I really do. Every voice I heard, which again I would just have to play the game myself to really know, really echoed the same thing, that Days Gone was mediocre at best. Now you do have the problem, certainly, of Square Enix doing a very similar thing to what Sony would have been doing around this time, of just saying it was a disappointment and it didn't sell well enough. And that is kind of the Japanese management style in general, is to always be disappointed, always demand more, always just be a jerk and a slave driver as a manager. But yeah, you see that with Hitman and Square Enix, where Square Enix says we're not satisfied with Hitman, despite the fact that there's a lot of love and passion around the Hitman series. You definitely see that more with Square Enix as they continuously move towards more focus on just doing Final Fantasy games, just doing the things that sell well in Japan. And I wouldn't be surprised if Days Gone sold incredibly poorly in Japan, and that's where they came from it. The whole Metacritic thing is still an issue, but nobody's bothered to say anything new about it lately. But this is definitely around that. Here you can see in this article them mentioning Metacritic for Killzone being 70, Killzone 1 70, but Killzone 2 being 91. But yeah, that is still an issue, and it's just a really bad internal metric to use, and always has been. The problem with using Metacritic or an external review or culmination of reviews is that it's so easily manipulated. It's so easy for Sony to get Kotaku to review a game badly, and then get some other companies to review it badly to lower the Metacritic scale. Yeah. Video games are very nebulous things, but they really need to just establish in the contract, did you make a game, did it have 100 collectibles? And they kind of do establish that, but then they throw in these bonuses as that they have no intention of ever paying. And it's very much just like so many other jobs where there are talks of bonuses and hints at bonuses, and then those bonuses never actually happen.
This world is filled with history.
Like, and if anything, it really should be recognized by anybody who's an employee at any level of company, and you're not an exception, no matter what job you're in. If somebody is making promises but they're not contractually obliged to pay a bonus, you're not going to see that bonus. You might get a little bit of it, but they're going to screw you eventually. They may even pay the bonus for 5, 10, 15 years, but then eventually some manager is going to come in there and cut those bonuses. And employees need to negotiate for their pay. Game development companies need to negotiate for their pay up front. The whole bonus concept is very much Hollywood accounting BS that needs to be eliminated.
You won't hold me back.
Like,
Blessed is the promised way.
Ooh, this is real scarf weather.
in a lot of ways, publishing companies are just too slimy for their own good when they do these kinds of things. And you know, we haven't really seen better offers here. One thing you might say that's good about the stock market is that if there was an actual stock market for video games and more varied companies more varied groups of people could be publishers for games, if Kickstarter really could get enough funding to fund a video game, that would be great. There was that website that Double Fine had, and I guess that's still around, called Fig, but even in the case of Fig, it was only games that they had already pre-approved that you could fund, and frankly I don't think any game of note actually ever did succeed and come out of Fig. At the core of it, it's just too expensive to make a lot of video games, and instead of taking steps back and saying, hey, let's make a single A or double A game instead of a triple A game and keep the budget intact and not give away, not have to do business with loan sharks effectively, which is all publishers can be described as, everybody would be better off. Except for gamers who are just demanding the best graphics ever, which now during the pandemic in particular would have been a great time to say, hey, we're actually not going to push to the newest technology. There's been video card shortages for 3 or 4 years at this point. It makes a lot of sense to not really embrace ray tracing, not really try and go for next generation visuals, and just have current generation visuals be the standard. Moving on, Konami is the latest games publisher to launch an NFT push. Yeah, they're all going to do it, clearly. There's just far too many activists, investors, I guess also in Japan in particular, that are pushing that. And if they don't at least pretend like they're going to do NFTs, then these activist investors are going to vote out a new vote out the people in charge of the board and put in people who will push NFTs. I wouldn't be surprised, particularly when you look at it from this perspective and video games perspective, if NFTs aren't the latest scam in a long series of scams for the ultra rich and super rich people to suck out money and trick middle class and upper middle class people, of which there's very few of those that actually even exist, out of their money. Like, it really does feel like this is just a funneling up scam. And it's a shame because it's really slandering what an NFT could be. That there really is a scenario where if you took a picture of yourself, that you would like to be able to own that picture. Say it's your wedding day, you've got a picture of yourself and your family and all that, and you want to really own that. You've gotten past the ridiculousness that the photographer somehow owns the copyrights, and you have to go back to the wedding photographer for prints of your wedding photos.
Wait, that's it?
Which, yeah, that whole system is not something that anybody likes, except for wedding photographers. The idea that you're having this beautiful moment of your wedding, and then all of a sudden, if you want extra prints, or if you want to use photos of your own wedding, somehow it is it automatically belongs to the photographer, who can just have you over the barrel and charge you for prints for the rest of your life.
Take a good look.
But that's a whole side issue, not having to do with video games. But yeah, in that case, an NFT kind of makes sense though. It would kind of make sense that you would want to be the person who could control, and I don't think there really has been a lot of talk about how NFTs can be used to control who uses a photo, whether you could delete a photo actually from some form of an Internet 2.0, whether you could flag video photos or NFTs and block them from showing up on other websites. Like, you could really increase privacy issues with a concept like NFTs. But that's not what it's all about. It's immediately all about just, hey, how can we make money? How can we screw over people, idiots buying little animated GIFs? Like, I imagine there's probably been a lot of technologies that have been made over the years that have been immediately destroyed by just poor launches, poor publicity, poor implementations. Yeah, I'd really love to see, like, every teenager that puts a photo on their Instagram to potentially have a way of taking it down from Instagram and the internet, particularly if it's a photo that they don't want published anymore, or that they shouldn't have published in the first place. But that's not what they're talking about.
I live by the sword.
Moving on, Video Games Chronicles: The Last of Us PS5 remake is nearly finished and could be released in 2022. I don't think I have a lot of enthusiasm specifically to play a remaster of The Last of Us. First of all, it's not a PC game, so I couldn't cover it anyways, but like with The Last of Us 2 not really knocking the socks off of people. Yeah. Last of Us 2 is kind of a great example that if there was a real long-running love for Last of Us 2, and then there was just an initial anti-woke pushback on Last of Us 2. If it was just the anti-SJWs hating Last of Us 2 for kind of no reason, that should have died out after the initial 6 weeks launch window, and then there should be more of a long-running love for the game. And that's not really what happened. And very often that doesn't happen. In video game journalism in general, the mainstream video game journalists barely play games, and if they do play them, they play them right during the launch window and never come back and talk about them.
You're done for.
But I can say I don't recall Last of Us 2 really feeling like it deserved a bunch of awards at the end of the year, which would be about the only time most people would talk about a game after its launch windows for end of the year, game of the year conversations. And arguably, it may not even have so much to do with being woke as it does to do with the fact that Last of Us 2 just went for a very different story it was telling. Much like a second season of a TV series where you just are telling a completely different story from the beginning. Yep.
Light upon the land.
You see that with a lot of forms of TV and movies, movie series, movie trilogies, where there's an initial concept that is kind of interesting, and then they immediately abandon that initial concept to just give you a generic procedural TV show for many, many seasons.
Find your baddie and bam, case closed.
Moving on, Video Games Chronicles has a long-awaited Warzone update, fixes an invisible operator skin bug, and more. Check that out if you're interested. PlayStation 5 consoles are currently in stock at Target. I did hear a couple of things about the PlayStation VR. One, it's going to be one single cord, which I assume will be an improvement. And it's not going to require the PlayStation camera because there's cameras and sensors built into it.
Impressive. Looks like you are.
There's haptic feedback and vibrators in the helmet, so that there are some slight improvements, but they still don't really have a lot of pictures to show.
The journey continues.
But yeah, you would definitely want to see a better presentation when they announced that than what they really did. Let's see, Video Games Chronicles says the annual UK game sales topped £4 billion for just the second time in 2021. The latest Horizon trailer introduces the tribes of the Forbidden West. I don't think I need to be hyped anymore about Horizon Forbidden West. Like, A, it will take me probably years to even think about playing the game once it comes to PC, and B, they've shown a lot of stuff already. A new Assassin's Creed Valhalla update should finally let players access the Yule Festival. Sounds like that is way too late for that. Let's see, the Epic Games Store latest game has been announced. Galactic Civilizations will replace Gods Will Fall. So another Epic Games Store. E3's in-person event has been canceled for a third year in a row. At this point, I think E3 should just throw in the towel and admit that it is dead as far as an in-person convention. Arguably, Las Vegas is dead as the central place that only has gambling and tourism. Ye- it was stupid. Like 60, 70 years ago when Las Vegas was founded, even if it was like 100 years ago, whenever Las Vegas was founded as a city. It was stupid at that point to say, hey, let's build something in the middle of the desert where there's no resources and build it all around a single industry of entertainment and gambling. And now it is, even as an established city, still kind of ridiculous.
I hope to stop standing in peace.
There's a difference between the idea of like video game companies potentially moving right in the middle of the United States where there's a lot of trees and water and forestry and not a lot of people, and then moving into the Nevada desert. Like, that is a totally different scenario.
I live by the sword.
Places need to be livable. And arguably, over the next 100 years, we'll start to find more and more locations all throughout the world that are less and less livable as water dries up and resources dry up.
I hope to stop standing in peace.
Wait, that's it?
This article does say no world on a digital replacement. And do you need E3 is the real question everybody should ask, and I don't think you really do. I think the world keeps turning just fine if E3 doesn't exist. Games get announced in smaller groups, which is better. Instead of having these long presentations. Arguably, we still have very long presentations at like the Game Awards where 60 or 70 games are getting announced at once, and then you are hyped about it for maybe a couple days, and then you forget what games were even announced at that point. The Nintendo Directs are way better, and even the Nintendo Directs often happen so often and cover so many games that there's still a decent number of Nintendo Direct games that I know I've forgotten. Moving on, the Fallout TV series is moving forward with Westworld's Nolan directing the pilot. Showrunners are also confirmed for the Amazon Prime series. I really wonder just how much of a story you can really tell in Fallout 76, because playing Fallout 3 and I assume the Fallout TV series is not so much based on Fallout 76, but just the Fallout series in general. But playing Fallout 3 right now, it is kind of shocking how little story is in Fallout 3. There's just far too many systems, and once all the systems get scraped away, I wouldn't be surprised if the Fallout TV series barely can go 2 seasons, maybe only 1 season. The Witcher 3 TV series may have the same issue in a lot of ways on Netflix, where once you just kind of establish the general tale, there's not probably a lot that could be added. And Fallout doesn't have an author who has written a whole bunch of Fallout books, as far as I know. So they really are just going to take the general concept of Fallout, which is a very basic concept that I don't even know if I understand it right. I don't know when the war happened. I don't know when the bombs fell. Sometimes it feels like it happened well into like 2077, well into the future, but then everything has this 1940s visuals to it, so it's almost like it's set in the future, but everything for artistic reasons looks like the 1940s, which is kind of silly. There is, I think, too much emphasis on power armor and Brotherhood of Steel
The world called,
concept
and I
stuff in Fallout,
Is
and
fighting and despair all you
like
know?
I have still not gotten the ability to use power armor because I've been avoiding the main game. So You can pretty much do the whole game avoiding power armor if you want to, and then you just feel ridiculous in the fact that you have picked up several pieces of power armor. And that is a very arbitrary gatekeeping element in a game that otherwise pretends to be all about being open world and having systems where you can do anything and everything.
I shall atone.
And I think if you were really to try and do a Fallout TV series, your source material is just going to be whatever the important parts of story that happened in Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Brotherhood Tactics, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 4, and if there is any story in Fallout 76 and Fallout Shelter. So probably just the main stories around those concepts. And very possibly a overemphasis on these events of Fallout 4 to make it feel very much not like Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas. But yeah.
I shall atone.
Unless Fallout as a TV series tries to just take the general conceit and then have a bunch of writers to do episodes like Star Trek did, which I don't know if that way of making TV works anymore.
Light upon the land.
It feels like you'd probably only have enough material for maybe 8 episodes, one season. You would have to stretch quite a bit to go much further. Fallout 3 has like 3 or 4 interesting named characters that you talk to and communicate with. Probably closer to half a dozen, maybe even a dozen interesting named characters, but the vast majority of the time you're just fighting normal people. It's going to be, I imagine, a lot like The Walking Dead, where The Walking Dead and the zombie pretense cannot be the real focus of the story, because then every single episode will just be, oh, some zombies are coming to attack us, we better shoot them in the head. And that is, I imagine, going to be a struggle to turn any kind of video game into a TV series, is that how are you going to translate the gunplay that exists in a Fallout series into a TV series and not blow your budget with a whole bunch of fighting shots and gunplay effects. Even some of those comic book TV shows, I think, struggle with that, where The Flash, for instance, is every episode they have to introduce a new bad guy, and they have to show the Flash running fast and beating him using one of his handful of abilities. And to stretch and make up for that budget being used, then the rest of the episode in The Flash is usually completely focused on just emotions, reactions, and interactions of people. Which, by the way, I heard that there is talk of the CW potentially selling itself, which probably be a good thing. At a certain point, if TV stations did change hands, it would probably help create some improvements in TV shows. Fox is kind of a great example. Fox is kind of a great example that just does the same thing over and over again. And on occasion they'll try to put out a new show, but then they'll cancel it very quickly because they're just too stuck in their ways, and they can just get as many views with less effort by running Family Guy reruns or Simpsons reruns. And on the other hand, though, it is also fairly nice that The Simpsons and Family Guy got to run a very long amount of time as the chosen few on Fox. But even those series have long since run out of steam and should have been canceled, or at least put on hiatus. Simpsons in particular could have gone on hiatus for a couple years, come back after a couple years, much closer to like a Rick and Morty release schedule than a more consistent Simpsons schedule. Moving on, Days Gone's developer pitched an open-world Resistance after the sequel to Days Gone was rejected. But Sony wasn't interested in the concept. A Siphon Filter reboot was also mooted. I think really what this may just be a case is that Sony didn't want to work with this Jeff Ross character. That whether fair or not, the stench of failure was on that character, and they did not want to fund the development of anything with him. Which at a certain point, yeah, he might be a jerk. Like, coming out publicly and shaming Sony is really a action of last resort when you know all bridges have been burned. Otherwise you would have stayed silent about it and hoped that you can negotiate further in some future time. Like, I heavily suspect, for instance, American McGee, the maker of the Alice and Alice Madness Returns games, I imagine EA doesn't really want to do business with him for one reason or another. But he manages, I think, to not piss off EA enough that they haven't completely cut off communication with him. So he does seem like he is somewhat still incommunicado with EA, even though, in all fairness, EA is not funding another Alice game, or they have yet to commit to funding another Alice game. That being said, the EA also has like TV rights and movie rights, so there is a TV or movie that the Alice series is theoretically going to announce fairly quickly, from what it sounds like, that EA will announce. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says an analysis tips Nintendo to release a second Switch Mario Kart game, which is, I guess, basically speculation on speculation. I can see it though. I heavily suspect that we will see nearly twice as many games released for the Switch compared to the Wii. Let's just ignore the Wii U, because I suspect the Switch is just going to have a longer life on it because of part shortages alone. And Nintendo really wouldn't do much if they released a Switch 2. They've signaled that at this point, obviously, by putting out the OLED model. Like, if anything, that is a hint that there may just be a QLED model or quantum dot technology OLED model, just high dynamic range OLED models. We may very well get 3 or 4 different iterations of the Switch that play the exact same games but just have slightly better screens, bigger sizes, better color gamut, better brightness, without any real change. And then it may be 10 to 12 years before a Switch 2 comes out, and I still wouldn't be surprised if a Switch 2 really felt just like the Switch. Same form factor with just slightly better hardware in it. Moving on, Battlefield 2042 is free for Xbox Live Gold subscribers this weekend. EA says it's investigating a FIFA account hacking attempts. Pokemon Legend Arceus gets a 6-minute gameplay introduction trailer, which I really probably shouldn't show this, but we've pretty much seen this, this Pokemon Legends Arceus, the next main game in the series, is going to be more open world and less cities, and you're going to just automatically interact with people instead of transitioning to a fight sequence. It's going to be I think a more simplistic world with more simplistic technology. And I don't think there's really any limitations in the game development for it to need to be a simplistic world. I think they just wanted to probably have another excuse to have fewer Pokemon in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if the real numbers come out in Arceus, if it really comes out in only one version, which I don't know if it is going to buck the trend and have a girl's version, a boy's version even. But I wouldn't be surprised if it barely has 200, 250 Pokemon in it in 3D model form, which is what they've been struggling, the Pokemon company has been struggling to do, is turn Pokemon into 3D models on a better engine and a better software, compared to the flatter images that Pokemon were depicted as in previous games. And then finally, Video Games Chronicle says the Ascent has been rated for PlayStation consoles again, which I guess is indications that it's going to come out fairly quickly. Here we have a game on Steam called You Will Not Remain. Very Neon Genesis Evangelion type title. Lovecraftian RPG. I kind of like the art style. I think that would make a interesting follow. That being said, it's free, so I don't think there's really a reason why I would need to put this on the wish list. Just check this out if it interests you. It's free. There's no microtransactions. Mini Racer here looks fine, but it just looks like a generic racing game. 59 cents, bunch of languages. Meteor Volleyball. I don't think there's enough detail in the animation style here for me to want to play this. Plus, if I'm going to play a volleyball game, I don't want to play a volleyball game with robots hitting a meteor. It's free, so once again, some prices, right? English, Japanese, Korean. Yeah, if I'm going to play a volleyball game, I want to play a volleyball game with humans in it in scantily clad clothing. Even guys, like, I would rather look at a guy in scantily clad beachwear than a robot. Here we have Three Kingdoms: The Journey, which just looks like a card-based RPG Chinese game. Early access, $10.39. Here we have Pinball Adventure, which looks like it's a tilt table game, but I think it's probably a little too simplistic for its own good. $3.39 English and Chinese. We may be back to seeing a lot of low effort Chinese games. Everything may be back to full steam. We have a game called Truffle, which looks like it's a simplistic platformer of no interest. Free English. A lot of free games though. Here we have a moat farming simulator with Twitch integration, which sounds like something that should not be allowed on Steam. $5.19 English only. Here we have a game called Savor of Humanity, which looks like a generic platformer. $2.99 English only. Here we have a game called Gun Runner, which looks just like a bunch of squares. It's free, English only. I wonder if maybe a bunch of free games were just put in a pile for them to approve, and that's why we may be seeing more free games today. Is Halusa Sabat of Koishi. I don't think there's something here. It's too zoomed out for its own good. Because, like, here's your character you're playing as, and then you've got these giant characters, and you're supposed to, I guess, hack and slash and beat them up. There's just a whole bunch of dead space most of the time in this game. This is early access for 49, Japanese full audio, English and Chinese subtitles. Here we have a adult game called Love Accident, visual novel. Doesn't look particularly that interesting. I think I'm gonna start being a little bit more discerning with a lot of these adult games. $10.99 English and Polish. And see, if anything, it being Polish almost makes an argument to say yes to this and put it on the follow list, but no, I don't think so. Here we have a game called Netterspace, which looks like Netterspace 2, which looks like garbage. $9.99 English only. Here we have a game called The Living Handra, which looks like an asset flip game, if anything. $1.39 English and Russian. Here we have a game called Shadow Watcher, which looks kind of interesting. I suspect this is maybe more just an asset flip game than it looks, though. See, the problem is you're focusing on these 3D models. They don't look bad, but unless you're The Witcher 3, it's very easy to just assume that the focus on the 3D models and the characters is at the loss of actual gameplay. Does look like there's some actual gameplay here of interest, but maybe not enough. $6.99 English, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. And it is a single player only game. We'll put it on the follow list, give it a chance. Tales of Ray Trithera. I don't think I'm going to pronounce anything right today. Looks like it's a visual novel. Almost feels like it's set in the middle of like Siberia or some Mongolia location. It's free, but then it's apparently actually $10.99 English only. I would say there probably aren't enough games set in Mongolia, but I don't know if there's a lot of stories to be told in Mongolia either. At some point in the future, if humanity survives long enough, I suspect we will have more remote tribes come into the regular, into the internet world, the interconnected world, and we'll start to see video games telling tales of deep African tribes and their lore. But we haven't really seen a lot of that happen even here. There's very few games about Native American stories, first tribe stories, Eskimo stories. We barely have even started to see like Indian culture inspired stories. And India is a fairly connected country with a lot of people. Moving on, we have a Cube Hook VR game, which looks like it's nothing but dice rolling. $5.39 English only. Here we have Everyday Life Eden Growl, which doesn't look like anything really, just some kind of generic survival game. Early access 1274 English only. Now I still don't really control how many games come out. Like, there's no fair way to actually do that. So
I live by the sword.
it is very possible that 100 games came out between Wednesday and this Friday, and we'll have to go through most of those. Ideally, we'd want to see at least GameDeveloper.com news articles. So that would be the limitation. And then we can always skip the follow list if things go late. Particularly on Fridays, we may skip follow lists fairly consistently. And we have a game called Office Number 41, which looks slightly better polished as a 3D models. It doesn't feel like these are just asset flip buildings and halls, even though they may very well be that. That being said, it doesn't really look like there's much of a game. English and Russian. Let's see if we can see some actual gameplay in between fading to black and then waiting a very long time on the fade to blacks. That itself is an indicator that there actually isn't any actual gameplay when they're stretching to make a 2-minute trailer. Yeah, after watching it in motion, it really doesn't feel like it deserves a follow.
Come on!
I live by the sword. Take that.
No!
Here we have a game on Steam called Insomnis, which, same thing I just said. Potential asset flip horror game.
Shade imaginable.
Easier to dismiss this one, I would say. 1349, English full audio, whole bunch of other languages. The thing about horror games too is even if I made a mistake and skipped something that really deserved to be covered,
Show's over.
it would have to be such an amazingly well received game for me to ever hear about it and for it to really have any relevancy. And there's barely a dozen of those games that have come out in probably 2 decades. This newer Rose, again, doesn't look interesting, whatever it is. Looks like it might be a half programming, half top-down shooter game, but the visual polish is lacking. Yeah. Like Five Nights at Freddy's had to, as a series, had to be so relevant and so popular because of people covering it and playing it that only at that point would it justify that it actually is a relevant enough game that needs to be
No!
covered. And even at that, I'm still not sure I really feel like I need to cover the Five Nights at Freddy's games. Any of them. I might want to cover the newest one, and that's about it.
Show's over. Goodbye is inevitable.
Gamatsu has some articles here. Square Enix team Asano planning multiple title announcements and releases in 2022. If these are drawings of what they're going to announce, then that might be some hints.
Wait, that's
But
it.
I guess that is very much an announcement for an announcement. King of Fighters 15 Kula Diamond trailer and screenshots are
Answers come in every
available.
shade imaginable.
They are definitely hyping up for King of Fighters. Hatsune Miku Logic Paint S is coming to Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC on January 19th. Which apparently is a puzzle game. Yeah, I really feel just super nasally today. Apologies if that's coming out in the voice acting, but yeah, I'm so congested. Soul Cresta release date forum live stream set for January 7th. Update the live stream has been delayed. I believe Sol Cresta as a game has been delayed several times at this point. The Tribes of the Forbidden West trailer is also here, by Gamatsu. A game called Blade Assault for PC launches January 17th. No video to check out what that is. I guess we'll just wait till it comes out. Dimension Trooper Neptune Top Nep launches January 20th, which this is, I guess, another Neptunia game, or spin-off Neptunia game, which I guess they are still doing that. Yeah, definitely a spin-off game though, so this would be a weird one to make a special effort to play if you weren't a big fan of the Neptunia series in the first place. And I've yet to play any Neptunia games, so I am not particularly interested in playing a spin-off game like this until I potentially was a fan of Neptunia games, and I don't think I would even then probably play the spin-off game. Matsu says E3 2022 to be digital only, so maybe they have slightly more information. Pokemon Legends Arceus overview trailer and Japanese TV commercials are on Gamatsu. Kimco RPG Selection Volume 9 for PS4 launches April 21st in Japan. This feels like a collection of RPG games I don't recognize. As Divine Saga, I think I've heard of that. Ghost Sync, Swords of Elpisia, and Ambition Record. I don't think I recognize any of those. You don't need to go full screen, particularly. Yep, and it definitely feels like it is just a collection of old RPG games. Old 8-bit RPG games. Which I really would wonder, are these games being sold because they're popular, or are these games being sold because people just own the rights to them and the Japanese want them to be popular? I feel like there's gotta be a generational shift at some point where Japanese gamers stop caring about 8-bit RPG games. But it could be very much that they are targeting a very niche, nostalgic audience of a few thousand people in Japan that do want to play those old 8-bit RPG games, and that's all they care about. Moving on, we actually will finish fairly quickly here. Genkai Toki 7 Pirates H is coming to Switch on February 3rd. With the H at the end, I assume that is an indication that this version of the game is going to have adult content on the end, because H sounds like ecchi when pronounced in Japanese. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a more censored version that comes out for the PlayStation and doesn't have the H. Yeah, you can definitely tell on these screenshots that this is a collection of anime girls in scantily clad and lewd positions. Scantily clad clothing, lewd positions. Let's see what the trailer says. What the video looks like. I wouldn't be surprised if this game actually doesn't have any actual nudity in it and just has a lot of cleavage that's showing. Moving on, Gamatsu says Escatos for Switch launches January 13th in the West. This is a shoot 'em up game, obviously. Monster Hunter Rise PC launch trailer and screenshots, which definitely will be in a weird decision whether I want to play Monster Hunter Ultimate or Monster Hunter Rise whenever I got around to playing a Monster Hunter game. It was a very good possibility there would be 2 or 3 other Monster Hunter games released by the time I got around to playing one. And I think there is something around the idea of the concept of hunting monsters compared to Fallout 3, where you don't have to have as much story. If it is just you are a monster hunter, that's your title, that's what you do, that's what you're going to do for the whole game. I don't know if Monster Hunter ever tries to give any bigger narrative than that, really. Maybe there's a slightly large overarching narrative, but from mission to mission it may be something as simple as just go hunt this monster. And we saw that in Borderlands too, where it's you get these quests, and some of the quests were as simple as just go kill this guy or shoot this guy in the head.
Take that.
They were usually fairly short and sweet quests, which, yeah, I feel like gamers nowadays in particular want to see the games just move faster and faster and faster, and that they don't want to be taking 5 or 6 hours to finish one major quest. And if you do want something like that, you probably want it very polished, like Final Fantasy VII, not as an exception, not as a norm. Moving on, Token Rambu Warriors has its 3rd trailer, according to Gamatsu. The post-apocalyptic RPG Showa America story has been announced for PS5, PS4, and PC. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, it's like a Japan or China took over America. Interesting. It's like, what if Japan and America merged? It's an interesting thought. Dangerous narrative. Certainly the decent chance to irritate somebody. In a lot of ways, I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't something like the Lollipop Chainsaw or hack and slash zombie games with a samurai sword. What is that one called? Like, both of those games were very much silly and not done quite with enough polish to get good sequels, or get sequels at all. Yeah, Onichambara is what I'm thinking of. Yeah, and I bet that's kind of what this is. This is another take on let's start over and make something that's kind of like an Onichambara game. Zombies and samurai swords. Red-headed girl on a motorcycle going through a Japan/America country. No More Heroes might be another great example of that type of game where you have a guy with a laser sword. So yeah, that sounds interesting. We'll see how it really plays. Here we have a game on Steam called Ghost Exile, which looks like nothing. Early access $13.49, English, Russian, and Ukrainian. Here we have a game called Crazy Party, which looks like nothing. $7.99 English and Japanese. Here we have Cupid's Story First Date, which is tagged as a JRPG. I wonder if this might be one of those games that actually doesn't even support Japanese as a language yet, claims to be a JRPG. It's free. English, Portuguese, Brazil. That's what I was thinking. Which honestly, if you're not supporting Japanese, you shouldn't be allowed to use JRPG as a game describer. Because this is totally inaccurate too. Nothing here screams JRPG. This screams more just an action RPG. Or just an RPG in general. Doesn't look terrible, but doesn't look good enough. I imagine maybe there will be a full version of this game that comes out later, but you can see they've listed Cupid games and Cupid nonograms, and that's all they've really done. So Supernova Games doesn't really have much of a pedigree as far as games they've released.
The ordained hour has arrived. Luminescence, shining hope.
Moving on, we have Rockstar Manager, which looks like nothing. $1.69 English, Portuguese, Brazil, and Russian. Here we have Assassin at Crimson Ridge, which looks like it might be a slightly interesting, different kind of comic book art style to it. It's $3.99 English only. 6 mostly different endings, 30 minutes each, meaning you're going to get basically 3 hours at most of entertainment for $4. That's going to be definitely a hard sell, but I'm going to be generous and put it on the follow list. And I can see the beginning of the end already, which is great. Like, today is really the perfect day to end early. We don't really need to leave games for Monday. Not yet. Then maybe in a couple more weeks. But yeah, I definitely am not feeling up to it. I also started late. Like, I had a lot of like aches and pains, I think, because of just humidity and pollen and allergies. That frankly, if I was much worse, I would have just not even bothered to stream at all. Moving on, we have Space Turret Gunner, which looks like nothing of interest. $8.99 VR game, English and Chinese. Monads 2. Looks like it's a placement RPG, positional RPG, turn-based. $14.99 English and Korean. No to that. Here we have a game called No Haste, which looks like nothing. $4.99 English, German, French, and Spanish. Here we have a game called Mercs Fully Loaded, which I think I can dismiss. It's early access, $14.99 single player online co-op, English only. The danger here is that there might actually be a game here, so I'll have to be generous and put that on the follow list. Then we have Fishing Adventure VR, which I'm always looking for a fishing VR game. I'd like to see how this actually plays, but for some reason the forward arrow is just cycling between those two. Yeah, there's a whole lot of jitteriness you can see in this, as far as just holding the pole steady. The idea of fishing in VR is an interesting concept, certainly, so I'm going to give it a follow, but A, I'll probably never have a VR headset, and B, I probably would never buy that. Anyways, Gamatsu has the Famitsu sales, so you can see the top 10 are all Nintendo Switches games, and none of them are even new. 11 through 30 will be announced on the January 8th. Hardware sales still staying about the same. We're still seeing a lot of Xboxes, Series S's and Series X's selling. Still getting trounced by PlayStation 5 now that it's finally in stock, but doing better. Certainly. We're seeing 3, 4, 5 times as many units sold between the Xbox Series X and S compared to previous times when barely 4 or 5 units in total were being sold. This game, Mary Skelter 2 for PC, launches on January 13th. It's 15% off launch price. I believe, though, there's a bit of a controversy in here in that one of the groping adult game, the groping minigame in it may be missing for the PC version, which only kind of makes sense if Steam is just pushing more pro censorship, or if it's a case that they ported the PlayStation version, which was already censored, to the PC version. Which I also wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo is just straight up saying, we want the adult groping minigames or whatever extra content you can possibly put in our version of the game to be an exclusive. And so maybe Nintendo is specifically saying, yes, put the adult content in our games and then censor it out even on PC. I don't know why Nintendo would care, because they're really not competing with PC. But I would lean slightly more to the theory that it's just easier to port a PlayStation version of a game to PC than it is to port a Nintendo Switch version of a game to PC. And so they just started from that perspective. I also wouldn't be surprised if it's a case where they are just not making good backups and versions of the software, and so once they edited out the adult content, they just deleted the files. That'd be really, really crazy to do, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some Japanese companies out there that do things like that, even now.
The path ends here.
I don't think I really have to be playing as Runecraft. Moving on, Clockwork Aquario is coming to Xbox One and PC this summer, which it's a platformer action game, I guess. The Shinigami Shibito Meguri has been delayed to September 15th in Japan, no longer due out in March. I would assume that this is a visual novel. This lady either has a metal jaw or some kind of weird scarf. Like, all of them have a lot of shadows under their necks in the way they're drawn, but yeah, this guy too has like a beard. Maybe this is supposed to be a guy with a beard. I don't think so, though. Yeah, I assume this is just a visual novel game. This is one of those announcement videos where it's mostly just somebody talking to the screen. Which, honestly, if you're just not capable of writing things down, instead of talking to the screen, you should have a speech-to-text recognition software, or a secretary just, like, take your diction down. There's really not a good reason to just live stream your face even if you're the creator of a game, if you've got nothing visual to show. It's important to know which medium makes the best impact. And as much as I would hate the idea of doing a PowerPoint presentation about a new game, if all you have is a few key topics and a few key pieces of art, a PowerPoint presentation probably is better than just talking to the screen. Moving on, Kojin Sword of Rewind DLC characters trailer is available. I don't recognize this game, though. It looks like it's a side-scrolling shooter for the most part, with maybe some platforming, but oddly, it seems like you're mostly just flying around, or at least one of the characters, one of the DLC characters can fly around. If anything, this kind of feels like a game that has platforming in it when it really shouldn't have platforming in it. Not everything succeeds by having platforming added to it. Here we have a game called Miyobo Catcher, which looks to me like it's a box pushing game from the tags. This is supposed to be a box pushing game, though. Kind of feels like there's a lot more going on here than that. $11.99, English and French. I'm gonna put that on the follow list. There's something different with the art there, something different with what it's seemingly trying to do.
How much is in it for me?
Here we have a game called Rising of the Moon Part 1, which, first of all, it's episodic, so that's a problem. Second of all, it looks like an RPG, 8-bit RPG. $3.99 English and Hungarian. Here we have a game called King and Knight, which looks like nothing of interest. $9.95 English only. Here we have a game called Virus at Home, which looks like nothing that I really care about. $1.89 English only. I don't think I would want to play anything that's just so focused around like a joke around COVID, or even if it was trying to be serious around COVID and it was just depicting giant COVID viruses. I just don't think there's an escapist mentality that you usually get in most other games there. It hits too close to home for too many people for there to be a good reason to potentially cover or endorse that kind of game. Here we have a game on Steam called Outerverse, which looks like just a Minecraft clone. Early access, $11.99. English, French, German, Spain, Spanish. Here we have a game called Aminus, which looks like it's probably just an asset flip first-person shooter. Coming soon, English, allegedly full audio. Here we have a game called Drug Business, which probably is an asset flip game. No interest. The thing particularly here is if you're going to have a game where you run a weed business, I don't know how you make that an entertaining element or an entertaining game. This is $16.99, several languages. At a certain point, I feel like a weed grow operation is not too far away from a farming simulator game, something like Stardew Valley or something. There just have to be a lot of people that you're doing business with, you're interacting with to take that fairly simplistic I'm farming something, regardless of whether it's legal or not, to the next level where farming makes a lot of sense. And I would say in the video game industry in particular, there's been not a lot of voices for anti-weed. You'd think that there would be at least one first-person shooter dystopian game out there where weed was legalized and it just led to the collapse of society. Or you would think in something like Rage 2 there would be weed growing around all over the place. But whenever there is references to drugs, the games tend to be completely banned in Australia, so they never do it. So it's really Australia's fault more than anybody else. But drug references also raise the rating in lots of countries. Maybe gets it banned in China too. So you never really see AAA game developers try to do too much around real world drugs. It's always fictional drugs. So in a lot of ways, weed, while it probably doesn't deserve to have a lot of games focused around it, is both underemphasized and when depicted over put into slightly too much of a positive light.
Light upon the land.
Which, yeah, I imagine a lot of that is because game developers and game reviewers are very positive weed. In general, that's fine in my book, but it is worth mentioning if you're specifically talking about drug business, as the name of this game is that the weed selling is the backbone of also bringing in harder drugs like cocaine and crack and LSD and things like that. It's like, it's not the case in the real world that there's people out there that just sell weed and nothing but weed. There probably are some people like that. Usually drug cartels are selling everything and doing a lot of bad things back into it. It would make a lot of sense in like the Saints Row games for weed selling and growing to play a big role, or the Grand Theft Auto games to be doing a lot of weed growing and selling, but it doesn't happen. Anyways, I feel like I'm kind of rambling here. Next we have Haunted Hotel Silent Waters Collector's Edition from Big Fish Games. Still very consistently getting about 2 or 3 hidden object games every couple days. This one is $8.99, allegedly full audio. Here we have Internet Cafe Simulator 2, which looks like it's just an asset flip joke game. $16.99, a bunch of languages. Here we have a game called Dungeon Maker, which I almost like the art style, but not quite. It still looks a little too RPG Maker for its own good. Early access, $9.99. I'm not sure specifically if this is a game that then is playable or if you just have to print out or use the software in conjunction with playing Dungeons and Dragons. Here we have a game called Last Bastion, which is just a tower defense game of no interest. Here we have a game called Meow Express, which looks like it is a platformer or a Flappy Bird game. Yeah, it's really just a Flappy Bird game with some slightly better visual polish on it than most Flappy Bird clones. 99 cents, English only. Here we have Refractions Beyond the Mirror, which just looks like a horror asset flip game. $6.79, English only. Here we have Deluge Threadnaughty of Crashing Waves. I don't know what that word is. Looks like it's another visual novel game, very possibly a Western visual novel game. Early access, free, English, allegedly full audio. I seriously doubt it though. Metal and Hauling RPG Simulator, looks like nothing. $4.99. Alder Forge, looks like it might be like a single A Japanese RPG game, which very possibly means nobody will ever review it or play it. And even if they do and people like it, it may still not really be relevant enough to cover. It's early access. It's fairly cheap for a JRPG at $7.49. It's English only. I'll give this a follow and we'll see if anybody likes it. And then Kingdom of Aetham, Crown of Champions. See, I think at some point I am going to have to just play a game that somewhat looks like this, but probably a lot better than this, to find something that it could be the next Elder Scrolls Skyrim game, because the next Elder Scrolls Skyrim game likely won't come out in the next 10 years at this rate. But I don't think this one looks good enough to start from that point. Early access, $14.99, third-party EULA, English, allegedly full audio. Here we have Glory of Rome, which is just a city simulator. $5.94, English. Way too much of the exact same color palette. There should be more variety in the roof styles and the colors. Sorry, I'm getting the hiccups now. Let's see. So GameDeveloper.com articles. Sega says it will walk away from NFTs if the response is poor. I feel like the response is already poor, so that seems kind of ridiculous. Like that these companies are going to have to somehow manufacture poor responses to walk away from something they shouldn't be doing. And I wouldn't be surprised if they manufacture the responses in such a way that they manipulate surveys to say the response was actually pretty good. Like good, poor, those are very subjective terms. E3 sticking to a digital event for its 2022 return. The Ubisoft writer and narrative designer Russell Lee has died. He was part of the Assassin's Creed and Far Cry families for the last decade. And oddly, like 2 people have died in the same week. So I wonder if there's a coincidence there or not. It could be just the pandemic. It could be that they were in the same car and had a car wreck. They never tell you what people die of. The Xbox 360 servers for Halo titles are being shut down next week. So, yeah. So much for the long-running 360 audience, if there was any of them. At a certain point, I don't know how you don't fully admit that this is a case where they have forced you to buy the same game twice because of multiplayer. And if anything, it is a great example of the problems with the idea of multiplayer being added to games, is that you're paying for a product and then not being able to use that product after they decide at some arbitrary point to shut down the servers. And that is definitely a big factor as to why I only look at games from the single player perspective. Like I've played a lot of really old games, and because they're single player games, there's not really been any problems playing them. If I was trying to play old multiplayer games, it would be nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. Moving on, EA is investigating FIFA hackers targeting Ultimate Team traders. There's a report that GameStop is going to create an NFT marketplace and bet on crypto, which sounds insane. And then GameDeveloper.com says Unpacking and Inscription led the IGF 2022 nominations, which IGF is owned by their same parent company, so really don't care. PUBG mobile cheat makers must pay $10 million after losing a lawsuit. Of course, they almost certainly don't have $10 million and will just go bankrupt. But yeah, I would assume that somewhere Tencent Games and PUBG Mobile maker crafting games thought that that lawsuit was worth it, and it probably was worth it to stop people from cheating. You can see there's a lot of random characters being depicted here in PUBG. And then follow-list games, here we have Famine's Crypt, Even Death May Die, which looks kind of like a mobile game. It's still early access, so I'll give it some more time. We have something that needs more time. Here we have a interesting looking horror game. One of the adult games, I couldn't tell you which one, is considering removing one of the models of a character that is slightly shorter looking, potentially a little bit younger looking. Not really that extreme, but yeah. I feel like in that general concept, that's a mistake. If you're making an adult game and you have a whole bunch of different models in which people can pick their favorite body type and dress them up and into different outfits and such. If you're removing somebody's favorite character, you're going to run into some complaints there for no good reason. It's better just to leave it in once it's been added. It's different, I suppose, if it was never there in the first place. So this is some kind of like very visually polished hacking game. I suspect it's a game where you're actually just in this one room the whole time. That being said, Mob Rule says put this on the wish list, so I'll put it on the wish list. Kellogg's Gut Bacteria Reef is mostly positive. Is this a VR game? Yep, it is. This is Kellogg's, the cereal maker, trying to advertise. Here we have a game called Kelly Pot, which looks like it's a platformer hack and slash bullet hell game. English language not supported. Chinese only. Well, that sucks. This looks really nice, but I'm not willing to risk it. Was there any promises here of the game coming out in English? Like, why is everything described in English if that's the case? When they first put the game out in English and said English was supported, 1 year later, as they updated and finished the game, not only is the new content untranslated, anything they changed in the first half is also no longer translated, and the devs have straight up removed English as a supported language after initially promising a translation. That is an interesting twist of fates, certainly. I've never seen a company start to support English and then give up and undo it. Kind of the exact same thing I was just talking about, though. Adding something in and then taking it away later is going to get people very upset. In this case, I have to remove it from the follow list. I can't possibly play a game that's not translated. There's no point in following it. This game needs more time. This game is mixed already, so we can get rid of this. Keen One Girl Army. Some kind of dungeon crawler rated very positively. Yeah, this looks good. We'll put that on the wish list. Let's see. Kaze and the Wild Masks. Looks good. Overwhelmingly positive. 1999. English. So we'll put that on the wish list too. Kathy Rain's Director's Cut. Was there a reason why I would have not wanted to get the director's cut. I guess it's just because I probably already own the main game. So what's the difference between the main game and the director's cut? Like, that kind of barely means anything. It's a reimagining of the 2016 point-and-click detective game set in the 90s. Let's see. So the director's cut is extended storyline, including a longer, more satisfying ending and 700 new lines of dialogue with the original cast. It's an interesting experiment, a potentially expensive experiment, certainly, to buy a game twice, but it is definitely an interesting experiment to say, hey, what would a game look like if you came back after it succeeded somewhat and just did it again? Arguably, director's cuts probably shouldn't exist in video games world. We get Game of the Year editions and DLC instead. It doesn't feel like this developer has done any other director's cuts, although in fairness, they only have Whispers of a Machine as another game. I think I'd also have to work fairly hard to justify buying that. And this game needs more time. The other thing, I think we probably already talked about this, is that Call of Duty Warzone Season 1 patch notes are available. So I just need to go through my one main Twitter feed, and then we'll be done for today in less than an hour and 45 minutes, which is really just great. Like, this is what I've always said I wanted, was just to potentially reduce how long these streams go. That being said, as far as daily quests, I still kind of wouldn't want one ranked or unranked. Actually, I could just do unranked, come to think of it. At least one unranked victory. There's no longer any motivation to play private games again, and then there is definitely reasons to come back and really just grind out on beginner. Just play the beginner against this character over and over again and guarantee wins, because it's not even worth your effort to try and beat the experienced character if 1 out of every 3 games potentially ends up with a loss. Apparently G4 TV has 20,000 followers on Twitch. No, not Twitch, Twitter. Twitter at this point is kind of also dying, although I don't know what specifically, if there is a specific replacement that people are going to. Twitter as a source of announcements probably will still stay around for several years, but I don't think people really are choosing to go to it. Here's an interesting TubeBuddy retweet that says, YouTube views in perspective. If you have 30 views, you filled up a whole classroom, which, in all fairness, yeah, I guess if I convinced even a classroom of people to watch my videos, that would be probably pretty impactful. If you have 200 to 300, you filled up a movie theater. If you filled up 500, you filled up an auditorium. Of course, none of that balances out with how many views you actually need to get any kind of actual ad revenue from it. That's the problem, is the advertising always has been, you need thousands and thousands of impressions to get even a few bucks. Anyways, I was talking about G4 TV. I'm not really watching it. I kind of just don't care. Like, Like they really haven't done anything to interest me. In fact, they've made it fairly clear that both Kevin Pereira, who I don't think is really doing that much, is going to jump ship fairly quickly. They've made it fairly obvious that Adam Sessler will jump ship fairly quickly. I really am at a very different point in my life where I don't want mainstream video game journalists telling me what to think or how to feel about games. So I have no interest in watching G4 from that perspective. They don't really seem like they're offering anything new or different as far as footage of games or interviews with game developers, which I don't think they ever really had interviews with game developers. So yeah, they, in a lot of ways, G4 probably would have been the go-to source for video game news had they not gone out of business. Had they just been around this whole time, they would have been like a CNN or Fox News, take your pick, of video games, where it's just always there and you can always flip to that channel and see it. But because they went away and now they're trying to come back, they're just really highlighting to me how irrelevant in modern times they are. Which is a shame, because I really would have liked to see G4 potentially come back and try and do something different. I don't know what, but if they had just like changed the paradigm completely, then there definitely could have been something of real interest there, where all of a sudden G4 is doing something or offering something. And I heavily suspect that there is there probably is a generation of people younger than me that did not see G4 originally that might latch on to something like G4 or even Giant Bomb or even Kotaku. I wouldn't be surprised if previous generations, younger generations than me, are just going to go through certain paths where they get sold a bill of goods and get told that Giant Bomb and Kotaku and places like that are the places where everybody is. In a lot of ways where Twitter and Reddit also sell that bill of goods, like this is the place where everybody is. I also wouldn't be surprised if there aren't just a lot of Instagrammer and Twitch streamers out there that are really the source of information for most video game fans of younger generations, or even Facebook groups. And at a certain point, I imagine kids are talking to each other in schools about video games way more than anybody else, and there might be a single streamer or two that's influencing a large group of kids in the school because they're all watching the same Twitch streamer. It's probably a good thing that there isn't a consistent established authority. That whole Jason Schreier story, by the way, against Ken Levine, there are definitely some tweets that came back attacking Jason Schreier as really doing biased work and not really publishing a fair and well-rounded article. Which I kind of felt that too. I can definitely see why you would attack that, is that Ken Levine being attacked as being hard to work with is very possibly not a fair complaint, because the complaints that were being made were not anything too extreme. It's not like Ken Levine was accused of hitting somebody or harassing somebody. It's just that he's picky about what content he wants in his games, and the Ken Levine games that have been made have been good, so that's probably a good thing. And it does definitely feel like Jason Schreier and Bloomberg News in particular are very often trying to do just hit pieces on people instead of actually reporting news that should be reported on in a, I hate to use the phrase fair and balanced, but fair and balanced way. And I do think journalists in general should probably get pushed back on a lot of their articles, because very often, particularly in the video game journalism world, people speak and expect their word to be taken as gospel, when that really shouldn't be the case. People should be looking at all articles and reviews with a more critical eye. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.